All right, welcome back everyone to Race to the Finish. I'm really, really excited to bring the show back. Just because it's reached a point in time where I thought that why did I just abandon it in the first place? Thank you everyone who has been so supportive on social media for all the likes that we received on Facebook, for all the follows that we got on Twitter and Instagram. Thank you for remaining faithful to the show, how it was in its original form. But as I said before, that Race to the Finish in its second iteration is going to be even better than it was in the first. And that's because now, with me being graduated from college and being more involved in the community, I was able to meet a lot more people. And so, for new listeners who don't know who I am, my name is Carlos, and I'm the host and producer of this show called Race to the Finish. And this show is really mainly about bringing on people from the community, mainly from underrepresented backgrounds, meaning that, like, whether they're influencers or community organizers, poets, artists, whatever you want to call them. They come onto the show and they tell you all the listeners so stories or lessons or experiences that they've gone through in their lives so that we can all learn from them. So for this first episode of Race to the Finish, I brought on my friend Achilles Morales, and he's going to be talking to us about a little bit stuff. So, can you go ahead and go introduce yourself to everyone, Achilles?
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, my name is Achilles Morales, and I've been community organizer here in northeastern Ohio for the last 3 years um, for a nonprofit organization called United Citizen Power. It's a grassroots organization that's just working to increase civic engagement in marginalized communities specifically, so that government can work better for more people. So, yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's cool. So, yeah. So basically, for the listeners, basically what we're going to be talking about today is, like what are some stuff that community organizers do? Like, what does it mean to be a community organizer, and like, how can we get engaged? So, I guess like starting things off, what does your everyday experience look like? Like, what is it that you do as a community organizer?
Oh, so much. So much
I imagine.
stuff. There's a lot of stuff. Yeah, from like building volunteer teams and teaching people how to be advocates in their community and really advocate for the issues that they care most about, to coalition building, bringing organizations together to really work um, hand in hand to reach goals, because believe it or not, most organizations, we all have like a common goal at the end of the
Hmm.
day, and the outcomes that we're looking for might be a little different. But overall, we want communities to work better for more people. We want government to function better for people. We want people to be self-sufficient, and so filling in those gaps of how do we find what our common interests are, how do we have a better understanding of what our self-interests are, and working together. So those are two of the the big things that I do. The other thing is really looking to create what we call issue campaigns.
Hmm.
So really understanding what is most at stake, or most urgent in the communities that we work in, and really customize our work around those things to improve those things, and really give community members the opportunity to be a part of that. So a lot of dialogue, a lot of relationship building, a lot of voter registration year round, going door to door, and really just talking to people and understanding exactly what people are dealing with day to day, and maybe where there's some challenges in making what the changes that they want to see
For
possible,
sure.
and how to address that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you concentrate like here, like in Lorain County, yeah.
Yeah. So I work in Lorain County, Ohio, which is, if you have no idea where that's at,
I imagine it's so beautiful.
that's okay.
Yeah.
But it is, if you know where Cleveland is on a map, it's the county left of Cleveland. Um, and Yeah, not it's an eclectic
For
community
sure.
county.
Well, I mean, I can
I
speak to
I
it,
would say.
like, just because, like, I
Yeah.
did grow up here and stuff like that, and,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
will say that, like, growing up here, it's been, like, a pretty unique experience just because I feel like I've been around so many different types of people, like, it wasn't like a I guess you could say, like, a homogeneous community, it's a very diverse
Oh,
community.
yeah, definitely not.
Yeah, so, like, I was born and raised in Lorraine, um, and being here, like, being raised with, like, certain qualities and stuff, knowing that, people are different, I think that's something that's pretty good, to be aware of when you're growing up. But the thing is, what I will admit is, going off to college, I was able to expand my own horizons and say, like, "Oh, well, now I'm gonna go experience something new here in Cleveland." And, I feel like that's like a desire for, like, a lot of other younger people who, grew up in Lorraine, is that we get this idea that we're gonna be stuck, and so I feel like people are either really motivated to get out or aren't motivated at all and just kind of remain
Mhm.
dormant. So, I know you as a community organizer, you mentioned that you have a lot of dialogue and stuff like that, really ingrain yourself within the community. I mean, like, what specifically, like, do you do to kind of help out folks like myself to kind of see that, hey, we should organize, or hey, we should be able to do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, I think, like, so everybody has an issue, like, something that they want to improve, or, like a specific issue that they feel needs to be better addressed
Mhm.
within their community, right? So even though you're saying, like, there's all this opportunity to leave and, like, you know, there's and go to Cleveland and like branch out, like Cleveland, like I I live in Cleveland and we have our own unique problems, right? And
Right.
it's not no place is like the perfect place. Um and I think, like, when you're back at home, like you're still back in that community, right, where there's like not the most accessible public transportation, for example. And so the question really isn't, like, I guess the question really is, what do you care most about, and how is that issue really, like, affecting your life right now, and the life of and affecting the life of your family and friends. Um, and so that's how you really draw it out, right? Like, I'm asking really specific questions of, like, what's affecting your life the most at the moment, and that, like, that could be something like student loans, right? And that's not necessarily like an infrastructure issue for the city of Lorraine, right? Like, that is a larger, more broader national issue, but it's
Right.
still really important, because you can travel all and live all across the country, and you're still going to have that student debt.
For sure.
Um, so finding ways to really to address that, like, how, are there organizations that are working on that, locally, and what are they doing? And I think it's about, like, really exploring those things, and it might be a national thing too. There might be a national organization that's working on that. So how do we kind of tap into that work, and connect more people to it? So it's not just like a local thing, but like a more like national thing of who are the people sitting at the national
Right.
tables and coalitions who we can connect with, right, to fill in the gap,
Mhm.
because maybe they're not reaching the amount of people that they want to be reaching, and we're able to help in those
Right,
instances.
and
Yeah.
what I think about when it comes to that is, I guess you could say, like, accessibility. So, like, some listeners may be from, this county. I imagine a lot of listeners are going to be, but, of course, there are listeners who are from outside of the state. So I do want to give, like, a little bit of context on where we're coming from. So, with Lorain, Ohio being like a city that doesn't necessarily have the best education system, and a lot of it is privatized, like I guess you could say a smaller amount of students actually go on, graduate from college here, um, but like from like a 4 year university, because a lot of people do actually go on to community college, and that's great. But
Well, I think you should plug in how great that
for
community
sure.
college is,
No,
though.
yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah. No,
yeah.
LC
Yeah.
literally is amazing. But I guess you can say, I guess where I'm coming from my personal bias is like going over to Ford University with it being a private white institution, I mean myself being Latino, you
Mhm.
know, there are certain experiences that happen, right? Like when you're adjusting to a whole different community. I think like the biggest thing that I went through, transitioning from Lorraine over to John Carroll, where I graduated from is, you know, I always tell people like growing up, like if I saw like my friend on the street or something, like I'd be like, "Yo, what's up?" Like yell across the street, and they'd be like, "Yo, what's up? What's going on?" And of course, I made friends at John Carroll, and when I saw them outside on the quad, and I would do the same thing, like, people would look at me like I was weird. I'd be like, "Well, this is, like, really normal for me." And so,
Yeah.
of course, that's when you start to kind of, I guess you can say, peel off those layers where it's like, "Oh, well, this is what society is like in this certain place, and this is how I'm viewed." And that kind of, like, gets you out of your comfort zone. I feel like almost like growing up and staying in a city, keeps you in a bubble, and that bubble, and going out of that bubble is kind of like an analogy of getting out of
Mhm.
my comfort zone. So I got involved with like with organizing on campus and stuff, and through that I was able to learn more about myself, about other cultures, and about my own culture. But I also recognize the privilege that comes with that. I was able to, even while here in Lorraine, like I was able to have this scholarship to go to a Catholic school for a year, and then went back to public school, but that helped me get into John Carroll. and
Right.
and not everyone has that opportunity, especially here in Lorraine. A very small, a select few people get that privilege. You know what I'm saying? And so that, I guess you can say, woke me up to organizing in that sense. But what I want for people here in my city is to, they have a passion inside. Like obviously, things need to change, but how, you as an organizer, like how, like what do we need to do to kind of, I guess you could say, attach to people in like our generation? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Uh
Sorry, that was like a really big tangent.
No, it's okay. I think, like, the first thing is just, like, I don't know, I guess I'm feeling like there's multiple parts to this there's, like, multiple things I wanna react
Sure.
to, because I totally agree with you, like, it's, like, totally to be able to leave home to go to a different city to go to
Hmm.
school and, like, on a scholarship, like, that's a privilege, um, but I think, like, when it comes to, like, stepping out of your comfort zone, like what you were talking about, I think that there's a lot of people who are upset with the way that things work, in their
Right.
communities, and, uh, when you ask people to do something, that they're not used to doing, right? So, like, think about voter registration, which is, like, super simple, like, getting people registered to vote, like, you wouldn't think that that's necessarily the most intimidating thing, but it is, pretty scary to, like, talk to strangers for the first time and actually start, attempt to, like, walk the walk of, like, what you're talking about, and so I think in those instances, like, everything that's familiar to you is no longer familiar to you because you're doing something that you've never done
Hmm.
before. So if, even though you're in your own community, um, it still can be uncomfortable to feel like you're bothering people, standing outside of Walmart, right? Even though you that Walmart might be like a few blocks away from your house. Um, and so I think it, I just kind of want to like put that in perspective too.
Sure.
Like you don't necessarily for some of us it's amazing. It's like it helps. I know for me like it totally going to school like 60 miles away from home and kind of just getting thrown into like student organizing was super helpful because I might have just been more complacent at home to just like stay home and not do anything and not,
Right.
have to be social. Um, and but like for some people, being able to just do that at home is enough. And so I think it's important to like recognize
Hmm.
that it's not just like because we have the like privilege to have done this like in a different city, right? Like uh we just need to give people more opportunities so that which kind of segues into your question of like how do we get more of people our age and younger people to be a part of it. I think it's actually like organizations making it a priority, right? So I've had the like ability to also work and find value add in so many different things and have the opportunity to like report that and make like an argument for that of like why um, working with high schools, like a high school after school program, um, it brings value to our organization, right? Because it's not something there's not like also there's like not a list of like these are the people you work with and organizations you need to work with, right? It's like whatever works, but really explaining like this is why working with an organization is worth my time, basically. Um, so I think we as in like organizations, and then just like activists and organizers in general have to really think a little bit more critically about like who we're reaching out to, why we're reaching out to them, and like what's the value add. And when you think about it that way, I think you have to get yourself bought into like reaching out to specific groups of people, because I think if you're just doing it just to do it, then you're not going to see the results that you want.
Mhm.
Like if I work for the Boys and Girls Club and I have to like do outreach at high schools just because it's part of my job, but I don't really like think that you know
Right, that it's, like,
it's gonna
important.
increase. Yeah, it's important, and like I really do believe that high school students can like see through the bullshit.
For sure. Yeah.
I and so yeah,
I mean,
I
that's
think
something
like
that, like, yeah.
it's a matter of like being intentional and wanting to do it,
Mhm.
right? And so I think like even people who are in their 20s can feel that, like, if you're not being genuine when you're extending an opportunity, then people can sense that. And it's just a matter of like getting to know people at the end of the day. So if I'm also not trying to actually get to know you, I'm just trying to get you to do a thing, like,
Right.
why are you going to do it
Yeah.
if especially if you like feel like it's not a priority for you, if it's not something that you've ever been interested in, um why are you going to waste your time? Because I think our generation um feels that way a lot. Like and I can be totally wrong, but I do feel like like what at this point, like what is really the point of doing all of this work to try to like change the community if like it seems like other people don't care? Like, why is everything
Mhm.
getting thrown onto me? And so I do really think, especially with younger people, it's just a matter of like getting to know exactly what they care about and why they care about it, and being genuine about your feelings, and doing everything that you can for whatever that looks like for like the community that you're in, um, to like reach those people. So like in Lorraine County, right, that's like working with after school programs, working with organizations, like the Boys and Girls Club, or organizations like Save Our Children, which is in Illyria, that works with like underserved youth and at risk youth, um, and really learning what their model is and explaining the like added benefit to like bringing them into doing work around like civic
Right.
education and organizing. Like, you have to do you have to do that work, or even just like finding these organizations and like volunteering with them. um like, that's another way. You don't have to be a part of another organization trying to teach people how to organize, to like volunteer and empower younger people. um
Yeah, and
yeah, and it's just hard. Like, it's not easy, right? Like, even at a community college where everybody's a commuter and people aren't staying there for a long time, you have to also put a little bit more effort and try to connect with
and
like student senate and
yeah.
stuff.
And I think
Yeah.
that's what I tried to articulate in the question. Is kinda like, with, I guess you could, how can I put this? So, like, people who are going out to be students at a university most likely are going to be staying on campus. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And so when you stay on campus, like you're in a dorm and you can get involved with all these different organizations, right? And so what some of these organizations are very um advocacy focused, I guess you can say. And all it takes is for you to get out of your bed and then go to a meeting, you know, compared to like a commuter to a commuter who might be going to this very same university or going to LCCC, you know, Lorain County Community
Mhm.
College. And just when it comes down to time, you're wasting, not wasting, but spending so much more time getting to class and then getting home from class. You know, that's just
Right.
that's like less time that you actually have to put into, you know, community involvement when it should be spent on the studies. And that's what I'm saying. Like here in Lorraine, the challenge that I see, you know, is a lot of folks who do have all of this passion don't necessarily know what to do um in terms of making a change. And from what I hear what you're saying is, you know, it's up to the individual, but it's also up to organizations to find value in those very same pockets of people.
Totally.
And it speaks so much, I guess you can say, to, you know, obviously what you and I have experienced through our work, and especially what you've experienced. So I mean that's really insightful, Achilles. Like, geez. You know,
Yeah.
because I mean it is all really up to the organizations to really find value in, you know, our generation to make a change. And
Yeah.
if we're not at the focal point, then like you said, like what's the point? I mean, you know, so many other people don't care, then why should I care? You know, there
Right.
is that sentiment there, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
So I
yeah.
guess what I want, you know, you're good. But what I wanted to ask after that is, you know, you're coming in from like an outside perspective, obviously. So, you're not from Lorain County. So, like, you know, if you want to give a little bit about your background, like
No.
what, you know, what
Why
does
are
that look
you
like?
revealing this?
Sorry,
Everybody's supposed to think I'm from Ohio.
is that really? Is like
Uh,
this? Is that seriously like?
no, definitely not.
Okay,
No,
cool.
I'm from Texas. I think I have like Texas pride, and unfortunately, I didn't know I did until I left the state. So of course, everybody knows I'm from Texas because I talk about it a
Gotcha.
lot. Um, but what? I'm sorry. What are you asking me
No,
again?
I just
What?
wanted to.
When
I
are you
just
saying?
wanted to get to a little bit, like, get to know a little bit more about your
Oh,
background.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, oddly enough, I was uh, a film production major in
Uh huh.
college. I attended the University of Texas, and which is an amazing experience. But yeah, I didn't see myself necessarily going into any kind of nonprofit or like organizing work. I definitely thought that I'd be 27, living on a beach in Santa Monica
Really?
and writing screenplays. Clearly not. I live off the lake of Lake Erie, and it's just as phenomenal, even though I'm not writing screenplays. But yeah, I don't know. Being in college was definitely like a culture shock. I
Mhm.
had never really like most of the. I think most of my friends in high school could probably tell you like I didn't really hang out a whole lot outside of school, especially like if you were not in marching band with me,
Oh, you were in
you
band?
didn't see. Yeah, um, but like outside of that, like I didn't really hang out with from school outside of school, and so being in college is just like overwhelming. I could do whatever I wanted. When I wanted to do it, I had nobody to tell me like I needed to come home, like no one checking in, like where are you and who you're with and like what time are you coming. It was a lot. Um, but also having to deal with so many different people from so many different backgrounds um, was definitely overwhelming too. And I I'm trying to make this story not as long, but
Oh, you're good.
I think just to like give you like an example of like how I kind of interacted socially sometimes. Like I would go to meetings that I like for things that I cared about. There was oh my gosh, I can't remember the name of this organization, but student led organization where we would do like film competitions
Oh,
and yeah, and we would like work. I mean, the room was always, I don't know, I would like to say that there's, like, at least 100 people in these meetings, and probably was, like, there's a lot of people, and so we would, like, team up and, like, do different competitions, and, it was it was really fun, like, to shoot. I shot a music video with
No
a
way.
cool group of people, at one of this at this guy's, um, apartment building, and it was just, like, to, like, a Bob Marley song, and then, we did, like, a horror film, like, a horror short
Yeah.
contest, and they had, like, a makeup artist come in and, like, do a tutorial and stuff with us at the meeting, and then we went and shot our own thing, and so, like, that was a lot of fun, but I did find myself a lot of the time, sorry, that was long to just say, like, in those meetings, even though, like, it was a lot of fun for me, I remember like, not talking to anybody and being really shy and introverted, and
Right.
how anxious I felt, and the amount of anxiety of, like, I don't know anybody here, nobody's talking to
Mhm.
me. Um, so that was kind of like, me throughout my college career, like, especially if I didn't know you, like, was just gonna sit awkwardly alone and not talk to
So,
anybody, and then,
yeah, and I kinda wanna ask something about that too, like, so you mentioned that you're introverted, right? And or
well,
you were
I
introvert,
guess.
yeah.
I just somewhere in the middle,
Oh, okay.
I think.
Well,
I took a test, it told me I was in the middle.
oh, well, that's good. That's good. Wait, I gotta take one of those tests eventually, but, like,
I don't know what it was called,
yeah, I don't
but
know. But I guess what I wanted to ask is, like, with you being a community organizer and stuff like that, I guess people would necessarily, like, imagine someone, like, I think we, like, talked about this before where it's like community organizing is
mhm.
generally viewed as like, "Oh, we're gonna go out and protest. Oh, we're gonna go out and riot," like, just because that's what's in the media a lot, where it's a common misconception where I think you mentioned, like, that's not necessarily what it looks like, so I kinda see where it's like, well, obviously you have a unique personality, but you're also a community organizer. I mean, like, what does that spectrum look like? Like, how do different personality traits fit in with different types of community organizing?
I I guess I feel like I can't speak on anybody else's
Oh, right, yeah.
experience, um,
But
but,
I guess I'm asking about your own.
yeah, yeah, I it's really weird, like, and I wish I, like, had, like, I wish I had the self kind of, like, I don't know, not self-awareness, but I guess self-awareness to, like, realize, like, the shift. I think something that, like, definitely played a huge role is, um, the the year before I moved here, and when I say year, so academic
Oh,
sorry,
okay.
academic year, so, like, when so, like, fall of 2015, um, spring of 2016, I was working for a labor union, and,
Mhm.
that just we're, like, interning, for a labor union, and that whole experience, um, I was put in a lot of uncomfortable situations, uh, because we were organizing. The place that I was in, was on our university's campus.
Mhm.
I'm not sure how much I'm supposed to say, but this was a while ago,
Oh,
so,
stay within your
uh
boundaries. That's fine.
yeah, yeah, but just, like, the situations of, like, talking to other people who were not necessarily on board with what we were doing, and, like, having built up personal relationships with those people, and, calling them out on some of the sneaky stuff that was going
Mhm.
on, um, and, because these were my coworkers, and so as well, and so, like, it was just kind of it forced me to really step out of my comfort zone, and, like, stand up for other people and stand up for myself, um, which is not, like, I probably wouldn't have even thought of doing something like that, uh, like, my senior year of college when I was student organizing, like, there's no way, that I would be calling out somebody who I personally know, about the shady stuff that they're doing, and, how it's kind of, like, ruining everybody's chances at, like, better wages and all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
And so I really do think it was that specific, experience, um, that kind of made it a little bit easier for me to connect. but I also don't but also, like, not really at the same time, so, like, it taught me how to really deal with confrontation, um, and, like, uncomfortable situations,
Mhm.
but, I mean, when I started my first day in the city of Lorain, like, in Lorain County as an organizer, I was being driven around by a really amazing person in Lorraine, Max, and he was just like, "Oh, you should go to El Centro, and you should, uh, go and talk to so and so." And
Mhm.
and so then I was like, "Okay, cool. I guess I'll go and do that." And like, I was just driving there and just going inside and kind of like being nervous. Um, and then just going to the front desk and then just like making the ask, and I don't know, like, I didn't think about it a lot then the way that I do now of like, oh man, I really just like went and did this stuff and like was proud, and I remember feeling really nervous, but like also I didn't have any second thoughts about turning around and not doing it.
Right.
So I think there was like a lot of self motivation, but I also think like the other the other big thing was probably the fact that I was helping to really establish the work of this organization, and so there's like a lot of responsibility in that. Um,
I
that I
gotcha.
was responsible for establishing these relationships and getting to know these people.
And
Um,
obviously, it's important to establish those relationships between organizations. Yeah.
yeah, totally. And so I don't know, like, even, like, talking about it now, like, I'm, like, at a loss for words and, like, really in awe because uh, I feel like even when I try to do those things for my on my own, like, I sometimes really stumble, but,
uh,
like, when I'm working, it's legitimately just like, "Oh, cool, I gotta go and talk to this person who's, like, in charge of this organization, and I've never met them, that's great, like, let me just walk into their office right now,
for
and
sure.
it's not a big deal," right? Um, so, yeah, it's really weird because I feel like that should be a transferable skill, and I just get really anxious, when it's, like, not work
And
related and I
I
have to go
totally
and talk
get
to people.
yeah, and I totally get, like, where you're coming from with that just because it's like and I feel like that's with, like, any job, like, where it's like you're working a job, right? So you have certain expectations, so you're gonna go ahead and meet those expectations, but
Yeah.
obviously, community organizing is more than just a job, like, it requires, like, a passion and empathy and understanding and stuff like that. So you mentioned self motivation and stuff like that. Like, where does this motivation come from within you? To do with like community organizing. Obviously, you don't just view this as a job. Like, but what? Why? Like, why do you continue to be a community organizer? Like, why did you get into this?
Yeah. Well, now you're gonna let me finish my
Okay.
story. Oh, no, just kidding. We're just messing with you. But no, really, I think like I have made these two amazing people. I was uh, a part of this um, QPOC group called QPOCA, which is Queer People of Color and Allies.
Mhm.
Um, and they had these like leadership trainings, and I don't know. I was just trying to like do a thing. I think one semester, and I was like, cool. I'll go to these trainings and check it. Met. It was so funny. Like I made two friends, Amanda and Sarai, and they lived in my apartment complex, but I had never met them in my life or seen them, and it wasn't like a huge apartment
Oh
complex.
wow.
Like we get on the same bus to get to school.
Sure.
Um, so it was funny, and we were taking the bus back together, and so like I just like made a friendship with them, and like we did stuff all the time. They always tried me to get to do like things, and I would kind of do it, and then I would bail at the last minute, because they were mostly like or other organizational things, and I just like I don't know, I just never got fully into it the way that I wanted to, I guess. Um, but anyway, fast forwarding to like my very last semester of college, Amanda and Sarai just like they were kind of like forceful. They were like we really want you to like come and be a part of USAS. And so USAS is United Students Against Sweatshops, which advocates for factory workers who help to produce collegiate apparel.
Hmm.
And so we like kind of do a lot of work to make sure that the contracts that our university and other universities are signing with like Nike or JanSport or any other large company is making sure that they're holding Nike accountable.
I gotcha.
Since we're giving them like we're giving them so much money, so they should be making sure that they're not having any human rights violations.
Right.
Um, and so I don't know. I was like, okay, meeting, and I went to the meeting and kind of got suckered into like helping out with stuff. So I remember like the first kind of little protests we did, we were just like having signs, and I didn't really want to be a part of it, but I as far as like holding anything, and I was just kind of like, okay, I'll take pictures and I'll like run social media. That's what very low bar. And so I did that, and then they um I don't like saying the word force, but they really like convinced me to go to this regional conference in Alabama.
Oh,
And that's where I met so many amazing people there, and uh, I was like really inspired, like to be a part of like a huge like march on campus that weekend, and like walk up to uh, the president's mansion, which like on that campus, like the president lives on campus, like they have like a huge house.
wow.
Um,
Is it actually like
and
a
so
mansion?
yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah. Um, and so I don't. It was really amazing to like meet people from all over the South, who were like doing similar work and who were just like super passionate and like confident, and like that made me feel like I could really do this.
Mhm.
And so I slowly went from like just taking pictures to like leading a banner drop, being part of like the like leadership team that kind of went and talked to the athletic licensing director, and really kind of held his feet to the fire, um, which was that was like my first step of like holding somebody accountable and just like you know being honest, and asking questions that were like not easy to ask and that were not easy for him to answer, uh, and so out of that like I just really felt my voice, and I like wasn't as timid. I felt like I could actually speak up for myself now, and I could go and talk to
Mhm.
people. And yeah, I have still deal with the anxiety stuff, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't afraid to use my voice or to go and talk to people. And so the biggest part of the reason that like I continue to do this, and I think my main motivator, is because it allows me to continue to do that and to be better, um, at using my voice, at standing up for myself and the things that I want, and not letting myself be that person in the corner, right? That
Right.
nobody's talking to and feeling bad. Um, I like have the chance to like actually meet the people that I want, and get the opportunities and that I do have now, I should say. And so and that like that's an amazing feeling to be confident, um, and know that like I can stand up for myself. I don't have to go with somebody's project just because like they're talking louder than me. Like I can say like I don't want to do this, and that's okay. So like that's why I do this every day, and why I want to continue doing the work, even if it's like if it becomes in a different capacity. It's just something that feels good and feels right, and I'm also like showing other people that they can do the same thing. And for me, like that's probably the best part of the whole thing, is seeing that there's other people who don't know how to use their voice,
Right.
um, either, and I can show them that like it doesn't have to be that way, and you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I guess some like important things that I picked out of what you just said is like providing a voice for folks that don't necessarily, or enabling a voice for folks that don't necessarily know how to use it or feel like as if they don't have one, and
Yeah.
it kind of reminds so like it kind of reminds me of like the purpose of motivation, where it's like folks will really go out and say like, well, I'm an organizer or I do service because I want to help people, and
Mhm.
obviously like there isn't a person on this earth that does everything 100% because they just care so much about another person, right?
Right.
Obviously there is a personal motive on why they want to do things, and from what I gather for what you said, it's like, it's helping you get out of your comfort zone and feel more comfortable talking to folks, right? And I guess like how I kind of relate to that too is, I guess with the show, and I kind of like alluded to it in the beginning of the episode, but like with this show, it started a year ago, and I was really passionate about it, even if it just started as like a school assignment, and but I knew that I wanted for it to be something special, and ended up, producing a few episodes over the span of a few months, and it kind of blew up. A fair amount of people listened to it. What I feel most bad about is leaving it behind, and a few months later, picking it back up and doing this reboot. I remember through your words, it reminds me, it's like there are folks out there who don't necessarily have the spotlight or the voice, or don't feel like as if they're empowered to use their voice, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's a core value of organizing, but also being involved with your community, is recognizing that, some folks, they have a voice, but they don't know how to use it. So it requires a little bit of empowerment, but also sometimes that there are also folks in our community that um we overstep, like we talk over, right? And I think a
Right.
big thing is learning how to take a step back and actively listen to what they have to say. So like like of course there's been times I feel like you've gone through that. So I think, what are some like um how can I say this? So, like, what are some like important times that you felt, or what are some in general or specifically, however you want to answer, like, what are some specific times that you felt like you needed to take a step back for a community?
Yeah, I think every day. I think like that's something that you have to practice every day. Especially if you're, I guess specifically if you're like in a leadership position.
Hmm.
Because what can happen super easily is uh, you're doing all the work, um, and you're just kind of handing out tasks, and like it's really hard. I think like that is super hard. I am like get it. I've gotten better at that over time. Um, it's taken 3 years to really acknowledge, like, oh, I'm doing 6 things for this dialogue, and I have 6 volunteers who could all do one of these things, right? And everybody has a role, and has a little bit more responsibility, and also just has a better understanding of like how to put this together, right? And so I think taking a step back doesn't mean like, okay, I'm just going to let this person do the thing. Obviously, coaching and training and guidance is super important.
Hmm.
So I think it's important to stay present, but I think it's important to recognize that like if you want to change your community, then you can't do it alone. You can't
Right.
bring 20 people together and say you're gonna have this fundraiser, right, where you're gonna donate like to like a disaster relief, for example, and then you're the one who's coordinating everything and contacting everybody. And so you have 20 people who show up the day of, and they're all doing have done one thing, right, on the day, and they have no idea what it took to put it together. Um, because I think because burnout is real, and
For
also
sure.
like priorities change, life happens. So I think it's important to think about what is life going to be like when you can't do it anymore,
Mhm.
or when you have to take a break for yourself, like how is the work going to continue, or is it just going to be put on pause until you can come back?
I see.
So for me, it's a daily thing, and um, and I think like the community dialogues that we do is a good example because it's there's a lot that goes into it from like putting together the discussion guide to like making phone calls to making sure that like we have food to like the setup to having people sign in like to having a guest speaker like there's a lot like it doesn't feel that way the day of when you're coming and you're like participating it doesn't feel that way at all but I listed like 10 things or whatever like and they're all meaningful even if and important. Like I can't be help running the sign-in table while also trying to like make sure that the PowerPoint for the presenter is working. Like it just doesn't work. You need like a team and you need people who understand why each of those things is important. And the way that you do that is by asking who wants to do what and then showing and working with them to do
Yeah.
it. So it's like an everyday thing.
And wow, so I feel like we literally just went through a lot and stuff like that. So I mean, I guess like
Yeah.
no, and it's good because I think tying everything together. I guess what I gather from what you had to say, and giving my opinion to the listeners and stuff like that. What I gather is if we're really going to be building coalitions and bridges between organizations and in our community and stuff like that it starts literally with organizations connecting with the community to find value in the people that they serve, right?
Hmm.
But also the people who are involved directly within the organization to build bridges within each other, but not necessarily within the community, but the workplace is also a community as well. The organizing community is also a community in itself. And so if we're
Right.
not creating leaders, under us or besides us, when it comes down to a point where we're burned out or you're burned out or
Hmm.
there comes a time where something comes up and we can't necessarily focus on this work, who's going to end up doing it? You see what I'm saying? And so that in
Hmm.
itself, if we're not empowering others to do this work too, then are we really doing a service to the community? And I guess that's what I gather from everything that we talked about today is, everything is kind of connected where organizations are connecting with the community, but organizations need to be connected with themselves.
Yeah, totally. It's a both and situation.
Cool.
Um, it's different when you're like you have a job and you're like a staff member,
Uh-huh.
right? So I can say all of these things. I can say like, yeah, just find this organization and like be a part of it. And like sometimes the reality is like you go and you volunteer for an organization that you care about a lot, right? Prior going into it, and like sometimes you just don't have the best experience, and I would like to encourage anybody who's like currently in the middle of that or worried about that
Hmm.
or just like going into it and not knowing what your experience as a volunteer is going to be like um or even like in a work capacity um just to like assume best intentions even though that's not always like easy
Yeah.
and uh to also just kind of like be kind to yourself and remember that like there's always opportunity um and uh it, if you get take the time to really build the relationship like I something that I also just think is really important is just to be open and honest and that that's easy definitely easier said than it is to do and I like know that firsthand so I don't know I think like overall what I'm trying to say is to like not give up and uh whatever it is that you want to be a part whatever like a community initiative or community project you want to like help be in support of and be a part of the decision making process like you should do that if you're currently in an organization that's not doing exactly how like what you feel it should be doing like it's totally okay to bring that up
Hmm.
maybe on a one-on-one conversation with whoever and work those things out because I think the last thing that needs to happen is people leaving organizations that they're members of, volunteers of, staff of, because it's not a good experience. And obviously, like if you're have a good have a bad conversation and things aren't working, then like don't continue to do that to yourself.
Mhm.
But I think it's worth the conversation because uh, either because the person on receiving the information has to listen, and it could be a really good learning experience, and could also just make the organization better. Um, so I kind of just want to say that because I know that it's difficult, um, and it's easier for me to say those things because that's what I do every day, like
Mhm.
8 hours a day, and I have that ability to kind of move in and out of spaces and stuff, and that doesn't always we don't all have that, so
Right.
just don't give up and you know connect with the organization that you feel is really passionate about the same things you're passionate of and share the same values that you do, um, and just like be open to communication, and I hope that anybody who works for an organization that's listening is also thinking about how open they are to receiving and information and communication, and how they communicate with volunteers or staff, about how the work is going and
Mhm.
how excited they are for the work, because that's also really important, um, as well.
And you kinda answered, I guess, my next question because, like, when I was younger, before going off to college and stuff like that, like, I was that kid in high school where, I followed, a lot I followed the crowd, I was a follower, and I knew that that's not what I should be doing because I've always wanted to be a leader, and I always knew that I was, and I just never had the guts to actually, put my foot down and try to do something. Right, and it wasn't until I was, essentially out of my comfort zone, um, and pretty much, given the opportunity to actually do that, I was that kid, where I had 1,000 different ideas, and I'm still like that today, or 1,000 different ideas on how I wanna help, right? And that could be a really good thing or a really bad thing. And I guess my question is, like, what would you tell somebody that really, really wants to help out their community, right? But they don't know what the first step is to take. What would you tell that person?
Well, I guess my bias is like, well, what is your idea? You know, how do you want to help? How do you want to be a part of whatever change you want to create? And then how does that fit into the work I'm already doing so that I can help you?
Mhm.
Um, but if this was just, regular me, not, I think I would ask the same question, right? Like I would ask, what you want to help out, so and you want to be more connected. What are the things that you care about the most, right? And then think about what are some of the organizations that you know of, that may or may not be doing this work. I think just kind of listing that off, because uh, there's a plethora of like community organizations and national organizations that have like affiliates in a lot of cities, right?
Mhm.
And so it's hard to kind of sort through them all, because either you know of things, so like the NAACP, the Urban League, the Boys and Girls Club, um, United Way, right? Like those are organizations, um, versus like local nonprofit like El Centro or Save Our Children, or a grassroots organization like Lorraine County Rising, for just to give three, for example. uh, they don't have the same like um, national weight, right, of names,
Mhm.
and so you have to do a little bit of digging and connecting. And I mean, those, I think the three that I just named are like well known throughout the community. So um, you might also, the person might also have knowledge of those things, but I think that you can also like be very connected to a church too, right? And so like, oh, the church is doing some kind of like prison ministry where they're going and they're talking to inmates, or they're like writing letters to people who are incarcerated. I think those things are important too, and uh, that's part of what the reason that I even got involved is because I I cared so deeply about reform for or which I'm sorry, not reform. That's not what I wanted to say. Like abolishing like the death penalty,
Hmm.
right? Like that um, really is like where my roots are for a lot of my activism and organizing. And so I think it's what do you care about most right now, and where's your passion lying, and then finding a way to connect yourself. So if you only know one person who works at one nonprofit that you're familiar with, like going and talking to that person and connecting and seeing who they know and how they can connect to you, right? Think really thinking about your personal network is what's key, and using those relationships to get connected to other people who can lead you to the place that you want to be, right?
Hmm.
Even if you're unsure of like the exact work that you want to be doing, but if there's an issue, if transportation is your issue, then learning how to get connected with organizations that are actively working to address that issue, right?
Right.
um, I think is important, so you have the information and you can figure out then these are the ways that I can get involved and I can contribute to that. So that would be my suggestion, is just to really think about who you know and have coffee or whatever, and just kind of talk. It's really about that, about communicating. You can't get anywhere if you don't use the resources that you have, which are more likely than not friends and family and people, and using the resources that they have, which are more people, and that's really how you get where you want to be.
Cool. All right, so it's getting time to wrap up the episode. And so we talked about this before, but at the end of every episode I ask every guest just to say one thing, one last thing, whether it be short, long, whatever you want to call it, but like what is something that you want to like share with the listeners, with the world, like what if you had to just say one thing, like what would it be?
The one thing that I would say to the world is that the work is never done, and uh, the doors are never closed, and opportunities are endless. And so you should take it one step at a time. And also, if you're in the thick of it, know that the work will still be there tomorrow. And if you are waiting to start uh, tomorrow, you can say tomorrow every day. Um, and so uh, just don't wait anymore. Just go and do it.
Yeah.
And and I promise that the experience will be well. Um, and just go in with like open mind, well intention, um, and you'll have an amazing experience. So um, don't give up. Uh, and yeah, I
Cool.
think that's more than one thing,
No,
but
that's
yeah,
fine. No, that's totally cool. Thank you so much, Achilles, for joining. For the
for sure. Thank you for having me, Carlos.
Yes, absolutely. And to all the listeners, right, that followed on social media, right before this first episode, whether or not you were following from the first iteration of the show or you just hopping on board on this train now, thank you so much for the support. Like I'm putting in a lot of work into this, and of course the guests that are coming on, are sharing, very, very, very valuable stuff with us. And so going forward, these episodes are going to be roughly around this length. whether it be more bite-sized or a little bit longer, doesn't really matter. This is pretty much what we're going to be doing, like how we were doing it for the first time. For everyone that liked on Facebook, for over 100 people, thank you so much. And so as soon as this episode goes live, I will post on what channels they're available on. I know that we're probably gonna have a little bit of issues with Spotify, so I was thinking about going on YouTube, so you'll probably see this on there. But as of right now, you can still listen on Apple Podcasts. You're probably listening on there right now. And yeah. And so Achilles, I know you wanted to shout something out. Do you still want to shout that out?
Oh, thank
Yes.
you.
I didn't want you to forget that.
No, I didn't. I just didn't know where yeah, no. I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. This has been really great experience and so much fun, and I hope I'm able to come back on sometime in the
Yeah, for
future
sure.
for part two. But yeah, if you're interested in just asking me questions or staying in the loop of the work that's happening and just want to be um, more curious about who I am, please follow me on Twitter at Achilles 1492. Um, and yeah, just stay connected. Would love to connect with more people and be on the lookout for my blog that's coming out in July. Super excited about that, and I'll be sharing more information on my Twitter feed. But for now, that's all.
Cool. And for those that are listening, please don't forget to check the episode descriptions because that's where I will leave Achilles' social media handle just in case, you didn't type it in after he said it. Just copy and paste it. Just go straight on there. Matter if I leave a hyperlink. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We all can be found at, or the show can be found at race the number 2 to the finish. That's pretty much where you can find us. And so, thanks again for listening. I hope that you will join us here back in a couple weeks. And yeah, don't forget to rate and subscribe to the show. All right. See y'all soon. Bye bye.